on, traders? Happy Wednesday. Thank you guys so much for tuning back into the channel today. And as usual, I'm going to go ahead and let you guys know exactly how my trading went today. So let's get right into today's video. And as you guys can tell from the top left, right, I was trading on a simulation account, right? If you did watch yesterday's video, that wouldn't be surprising, but I did want to make you guys aware of that for anyone who was new, right? So I'm not actually using real money today. This is just on a paper account. And so as you guys can tell, right, I was only up $12.86 today. So, you know, and I do trade with 10K, so I barely ended green on the day. And as you guys can tell, I was trading a decent amount today. So I did have a decent amount of orders. And I started trading right at around 6:44, right? 6:44 in the morning I started trading. And then I stopped trading at 8:41, right? So I was trading for about 2 hours. And, you know, the fact that I wasn't able to make much is a bit disappointing, but you know, any green day is never something to complain about, right? So I am just grateful I was able to walk away without any red loss. And so let me explain to you guys exactly what I saw going on. So heading into market open, right, the market was trading between the middle and bottom VWAP. And for anyone wondering, this is a NASDAQ future on the 1 day 1 minute chart, right? And so as you guys can tell, it was obviously selling off pre-market, right, trading between the middle bottom VWAP. And what ended up happening at market open? Well, this thing started to shoot up, right? Then it eventually started to pull on back, right? So it shot all the way up to the top VWAP, got rejected, started to pull on back. And I bought in somewhere around this area at 6:44. So on this candle, I bought into TQQQ because of the fact that, you know, this thing was very bullish. There was lots of momentum heading into market open, right? And as it started to pull back, I thought we were going to continue to validate this EMA as a support, but, you know, ultimately that's not what ended up happening. We did start to bounce and I would average up, but as it started to pull on back, I would have to cut losses, right? Then as it would start to, you know, test itself again and break above the EMA, I would get back into TQQQ, only for this thing to pull on back, right, and break below. So although the pattern and direction, right, if you do zoom on out, it looks very clear, right, at market open, that it was very clearly ascending. What actually, you know, what if you actually look on the 1 day 1 minute chart, I kept getting faked out on these smaller pullbacks, right? These pullbacks that, although they weren't too big underneath the EMA, it still was enough for me to think, okay, we might start to change direction here. But that wasn't the case, right? We continued to climb, and so I would recover money back, but then as this thing would start to pull on back, I would give profits back, and then I would think about maybe getting in the inverse ETF, but this thing would continue, right, to break above the EMA, break below it, break above it. And so, you know, at around this point, I believe I was, you know, about $60 in the red. So I was down about $60 to $70 because of the fact that I kept starting to average in heavy, but these pullbacks kept getting me, right? So it wasn't very effective with my strategy today in terms of, you know, these pullbacks. They kept faking me out whenever I would average up. So, you know, I kept taking some hits there. And so I was down about $60 to $70. And as this thing started to pull on back, what I noticed, right, this thing was very clearly, you know, uptrending up until this point, right? Up until this point here, when we started to pull on back, what I did notice was we were clearly uptrending. And every time it would break below the EMA, it wouldn't last for too long before it would eventually break above and start to uptrend again, right? So it would pull on back, not break above the EMA or break below for too long, and then it would break above and form this higher high, right? So it would pull on back, form this higher high, higher low, higher high, right? Then it'd pull on back and make a higher low than it did last time, right? And this started to continue, but I stopped trading right around this area. So once I saw this thing pull on back, as I mentioned to you guys, I witnessed that every single time it broke below the EMA, it had a nice push up. Broke below, had a nice push up. Broke below, had a nice push up. And so as we did pull on back pretty fast, I decided to get into TQQQ here. And as it started to break above the EMA, I averaged in. And I really started to cut my shares around this area, right? I believe it was right around here because of all these previous resistance levels. I wanted to play it safe. And then I eventually ended up cutting my final share size, right, or my share position right around this area. So I did a good job of timing it, right, and going with the flow. And I did a good job of, you know, walking away. The reason why I decided to walk away was it was obviously not my day in terms of trading. I was red for majority of the day, and the fact that I was able to make it back, right, I was just very happy and grateful to just recover my losses and end even a little bit in the green. And so as we saw, this thing did start to sell off. And, you know, as I mentioned in yesterday's video, there was a big report that was going to come out today, right? And so as you guys can see, right at 11 o'clock, it was released. And the FOMC finally announced their rate hike decision, right? And so that pretty much determines how much they're going to raise the interest rates to try to combat inflation. And as you guys may have noticed in yesterday's video, I mentioned that if we got a 0.5 interest rate hike or better, then we would most likely see the market react positively, right? And if you actually see what ended up happening, well, prior period, this was, right, where we were at in terms of the interest rate. And what was expected was a 0.5% increase, right? So from 3.75 to 4.25, right, is 0.5% increase, right? So within this area, what was actually reported is what was expected. So in my eyes, I was wondering, you know, why would the market tank? As you guys can see, right? I was expecting it to react positively, but why would the market tank and start to downtrend if that was good news, technically what we were expecting, right? Well, I did some research, right? As you guys can see, I was looking at different articles, but for example, let me pull up this one here and you guys can see. So the reason why it actually ended up falling and reacting the way it did is the Fed raised its benchmark rate by a half percentage point, right? Which is what which is what most people were expecting in order for the market to react positively, right? But it says the expected 50 basis point rate or point hike in rates is not what is causing the sell-off in the market. Rather, it is dot plot expectations that the Fed will hold rates throughout 2023 and not begin rate cuts until 2024. So that is ultimately why we did see the market react the way it did, right? So I was expecting it to react positively based off the interest rate hike of 0.5 percentage point, right? But ultimately it did react negatively because as you guys saw, what they were pretty much talking about is they were saying that the Federal Reserve announced that, you know, although people thought that they may be close to, you know, the peak of continuing to raise interest rates before they start to lower them, ultimately that's not what they ended up saying today, right? They actually said that they're going to continue these interest rate hikes, although they may not be as aggressive, right? Because technically we had a less aggressive rate hike today, right? Of 0.5%. The past few ones have been 0.75 percentage point. And so the fact that we were able to have a less one today would make you think that, right? Maybe they are going to start to stop increasing inflation rates soon. But that was not the case, as the article explained. They do plan on continuing to raise interest rates and maybe might not cut back until 2024. So that's, you know, why the way the market reacted, why it did, right? That's why the news actually ended up being bearish, right? It's because of that extra part that they added where they said, we're not necessarily done or near the end of continuing to raise interest rates, right? So that was unfortunate, right? Because it did ultimately, you know, cause the stocks to go down with it a bit. But, you know, as far as long-term where we are with the NASDAQ, as you guys can see, we were still pretty overextended, right? So would it surprise me if we do start to pull on back? Not really, right? There's always a chance we can continue to sell off and even break below these support levels, right? Just because we had this nice little run doesn't mean that it's going to continue. But at the same time, right, just because it has pulled back before doesn't mean it has to this time. We just have to follow up with it, right? It would make sense why this thing would pull on back, right? Every time it approaches these areas, it tends to pull on back. Even around these areas, it would have aggressive, you know, pullbacks. And so if we do see one, should we be completely shocked? No. But at the same time, if this thing wants to continue to run, then it very well can, right? It can. It's been forming these higher highs and higher lows, right? So as long as the trend is still there, then there's no reason to be too worried, right? But big picture, we are very overextended still. So I didn't want to make you guys aware of that. But that's everything I wanted to talk about today. Thank you guys so much for tuning into the channel. If you guys are new, we do appreciate you dropping a like and subscribing. It really does help us out. And other than that, if you guys have any questions at all, go ahead and drop a comment and I will be more than happy to answer it myself. But thank you guys so much for watching. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I will see you in tomorrow's recap.